Hey, everybody, we are live. It is Tuesday night, February 10th. I've got Rory Paquette joining me at the Poduty Podcast Theater. I am in Pittsburgh. Rory, where are you calling in from?
I'm coming in from northern Indiana, brother. It's really cold up here. Lots of snow.
We just had negative 15 yesterday, and we had 55 today. So we had like a 70-degree swing. I'm waiting for all the water pipes to break.
Yeah, exactly. That's a hold my beer moment, right? You know, where you can't have this temperature and the other one all at the same time. But yeah. So we've had maintained really, really cold up here. So good snow, lots of frozen stuff.
Oh, yeah, it was brutal. The river's been frozen solid, and just in one day, we have it's all a series of navigable lakes. Really, is what rivers are anymore. They're just locks and dams around here, and so they were frozen solid Sunday night. Today, there's just like waterfalls of icebergs going over the edge of the dams. It's pretty crazy. That's Pittsburgh. That's Pittsburgh in the spring.
There you go.
Almost spring, I guess. Well, I've got 6 stories coming your way about live podcasting. Rory, I just have one question for you, which I didn't prep you for, but I usually prep my guests for. You're allowed to say whatever you want.
Okay.
I always ask my guests, Rory, do you know what time it is?
It's time for our stories, I assume.
That's perfect.
There you go.
What time is it? What time is it? It's time for Poduty and the news. Poduty and the news. The only live news podcast about podcasting from the stage. Poduty and the news. Poduty and the news. The only live news podcast about podcasting from the stage.
Oh, the theme song's really just the sneaky way for me to get from the control room to the stage. And Rory from the Podcaster Nation, welcome to the show.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate being here. Can't wait.
So glad to have you here. We got 6 stories coming your way. And this isn't the first time we met. I was actually, I got to be a guest on your show, and I was looking back at the dates. The episode came out June 2nd, but 3 days prior to that, I tore my Achilles riding a skateboard on Memorial Day. So I was down and out. I was probably under severe medication when the show came out, but not when we recorded. It was a great episode. We had a great conversation, and I really enjoyed it. So tell people about the Podcaster Nation.
Yeah, thanks, man. It was a great episode. I had a blast talking to you. So when you said, hey, come on this show, I was like, okay, when? I'm there. It was wonderful. So, Podcaster Nation is one of my 7 podcasts that I currently have up and running. And it's my second biggest one. Podcaster Nation is for any podcaster out there to come on and sort of give their story. It's a chance for them to get out of the hosting chair, get into the guesting chair. And instead of having to, tell everybody else's story, you get to tell your own. And so your audience gets to learn about you a little bit. But it's been a very successful project so far, and we've built a great community around it. It's been a lot of fun.
I do like how it's the Podcaster Nation. It reminds me of like NFL football where they introduce the Ohio State.
That's exactly right. And I wanted to do that on purpose. It's all capital letters, the Podcaster Nation, because, at the time there wasn't another one. And in case there ever is another one, it won't be the Podcaster Nation. So
that's like a lot of people just add the number 1 to the end of their handle, but then you wonder, is that the original, or is that just that's the first copy of it? But when you're the Podcaster Nation, nobody can doubt that.
That's right, man.
Well, awesome. I'll put the links to the show. Even I'll put the links to the show that I was on too. We'll give a couple links back to the Podcaster Nation so you can get a flavor for the show. If you're familiar with me already, it might be a great introduction. And then go in there. I think I was episode 79-ish. There's a ton more episodes. I think you're over 100. You're nearing probably, what did I see, 130 on there?
We're about 180 now, actually.
180. I'm way off.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. We moved to 5 days a week, publishing, and now we're currently 7 days a week publishing. So, it escalated in a hurry after you and I did our episode.
Is it all because of us?
I think that you were the causality of all of it there, brother.
Because of something, whether it's I don't know what that thing is, but I'm ready to get into the stories. Are you ready to go?
Oh, 100%. I can't wait.
And one of the ones the fans love the most are stories that I can't pronounce. So this one happened in Amsterdam, and I can't read the title. I had to have it translated to even get a description here. But something interesting is happening in Amsterdam. There isn't a soccer match anywhere on the schedule. Ajax supporters are filling the streets around Leidschendam wearing jerseys, singing songs, and showing up with the same energy you'd expect on game day. But instead of heading to the stadium, they're walking into De La Mar Theater to see a live taping of the Pack Shaw podcast. This isn't a one-off experiment. The show has already sold out rooms like Die Melkweg and Die Klein Comedy, and now it's back at De La Mar for a second time. What matters here isn't Ajax or even the podcast itself. What matters is that fans showed up on a night with no game because the podcast became a place where the community gathers. This is what smaller podcasters should pay attention to. You don't need a massive audience. You need a group of people who care enough to leave their house, wear the jersey, and show up together. That's the difference between listeners and a real fan base, and that difference changes everything. And one of the things that we talk about in this theater is getting people out of their house. Getting people to come to a place to enjoy a night out, sharing like-minded thoughts, sharing comedy, sharing stories together, and in a place where you can connect one-on-one. And that's what we're seeing a lot with sports entertainment. We're seeing these podcasts, they do pre-game shows, they do post-game shows. Right now, every update you see about podcasting and sports right now is going to be covering the big game that happened yesterday. So podcasts are a great way to bring community together, whether it's sports related like this show in Amsterdam, where you're meeting the players and you're talking about the game you love, or just whatever you're into. There are people like you in your own neighborhood. You can connect with them.
I love that is going on the way it is. I thought that was really cool when I got to read that story. Right now we're all craving connection, brother. I mean, we haven't recovered from 2020. When all of our connection got taken away, we all kind of went, wow, this is life without connection. Now we're going, hey, how do we get our connection back? And social media has, kind of structured us in a way where we're into niches and we're into groups and we have common, interests. So something like this, where it's all the fans of a ball team, coming together, I think that's wonderful. And they're just getting together to sit there and talk about it, right? On a podcast. I think it's beautiful.
I mean, if you're a fan of something and there's an event going on an off night, there's not a game, maybe it's, in between traveling or the season's over or our next story is going to be happening during the All-Star break, what better way than to go to a pub or a local community center, hanging out with fans of the same team that you all love, meeting some of the players, maybe getting some autographs or telling about your favorite play that you saw them do. You just can't recreate that with an MP3 file that gets downloaded once a week. This is a real life experience that you can only get by being there in the moment.
I could not agree with you more. I think it's fantastic that they're doing it. I think you're going to see a lot more of this. And I think it's a great avenue for independent podcasters to start, sort of taking note of in their subject matter. With stuff that they talk about, wherever there are big events going on that they want to sort of piggyback on or, be in addition to, where there's interest, you're going to have participation. And where there's participation, man, you've got success.
And they got a great one, another sports podcast coming up, doing another live show. This one actually is during the NBA All-Star Weekend. Draymond Green is taking the Draymond Green Show out of the podcast feed and into a real room. The show is going live in Los Angeles from the Odyssey Soundspace, giving fans the chance to be in the room for a conversation they won't hear anywhere else. This isn't just about star power. It's about timing, access, and experience. Draymond didn't add another episode to the feed. He created a moment tied to NBA All-Star Weekend and turned it into something exclusive. Smaller podcasters should pay attention here. You don't need millions of listeners to do this. You need a reason for people to show up, a window of opportunity, and a clear promise that being there live is different than listening later. This is how podcasts stop being background noise and start becoming events.
I love it, and as long as nobody disagrees with Draymond while they're in that room, I think they're probably safe. He's a little volatile, but I think it's fantastic. Again, and he's doing the same thing that the soccer guys are in a lot of ways, and that he's sort of piggybacking on this huge interest in the sport that he's involved with, and inviting everybody when you can't go see the game to come in and talk about it, right? So you can still experience it.
Piggyback. That's a word that we hear on this show a lot, and it's just thinking about. There used to be a saying back in the early blogging days called newsjacking, and newsjacking was a way to take a headline, hurry up and write a blog post about it, and then try to get it ranked in Google in the search engines really quick. And if you think about that, how the world has turned, how social media has changed the world, we're moving so fast with the information that we're putting out that now those blog posts have become these real life events with podcasters. So we saw one with I think the Carolina Panthers quarterback did a pregame show from the parking lot. We're seeing Draymond Green tie in to NBA All-Star Weekend. That piggyback technique that Rory's talking about, that's something you can do in any industry. If there's something that somebody's talking about that's related to what you do, see if you can inject yourself into that conversation. Can you be part of that event? Maybe the first year you just volunteer, and then the next year you get invited back to do something else. But find out where these conversations are happening and put yourself in the middle of those conversations.
Absolutely. And I think the volunteering part is a pretty big deal too. I'm all in favor of podcasters getting paid for their work, 100%. But if you're trying to break into something new, you offer it up. You go out and you say, hey, I want to give before I get. And when you do stuff like that, then people are very receptive. It's usually an open door, and it's going to be a great way to get in there and get started.
Being part of the community, it really can open doors for you. You can make the right connections, and that's a choice that you want to make because you want to get into that community and make those connections. But if somebody just wants to pay you an exposure, that's a different conversation that you might want to have with the organizer. But using what you've already built, the asset of your media that you've created to open doors, to get into conferences, to get media passes even. Sometimes that exchange is you might get free attendance to the conference. In exchange that the conference expects you to create content while you're there. And that's a great exchange. Sometimes that can save you hundreds of dollars just by getting that pass because you've built an audience who cares about the same things that conference is talking about.
Oh, 100%. And then let's not forget the fact that you are, like you said, actually making content while you're there that you then get to repurpose and use over and over in your own, sort of exploits. So, you can't find that kind of great content everywhere and on accident. Sometimes you have to go out and you got to be purposeful about it.
Use what you built, open those doors, make those connections, and soon you might be in Cork, Ireland on the main stage. This is Irish broadcaster Ryan Tubridy is taking his podcast, The Bookshelf Live, onto one of Cork's biggest stages, the Cork Opera House. Tickets range from 35 to 40 euros. And the show is being billed as a one-night-only live experience where the audience doesn't just listen, they participate. This matters because it isn't a tour stop built around a flashy set or heavy production. It's built around conversation, storytelling, and access. The audience gets something they can't get from the podcast feed, including the chance to ask questions live. For smaller podcasters, this is an important reminder. You don't need spectacle to justify ticket prices. You need trust, a clear point of view, and a format that invites people into the conversation. This show works because it treats the podcast as a shared experience and not just content being consumed. And we talk about these nights out for when you go to see a live podcast. And in the theater space that I'm in right now, most of the time tickets are $10. This one here is he's a major broadcaster in Ireland. He's very well known. He's like the Johnny Carson of Ireland. And his tickets are $30. They start at $30 or 30 euros to have a night out, to experience this person that you've seen on TV 1,000 times, to sit in the same room while they interact and with the audience. They take Q&A. They take questions from the audience and comments and feedback. You get to see that all happen in real time for $30. You have the worst night of your life. You're only out the cost of a nice dinner. It's not too bad.
Absolutely. I love this particular story. I mean, not all of them. This is the one that I kind of kept coming back to because, I work with podcasters directly in a lot of ways. And one of the issues that we have as podcasters is we never see our own value. We are programmed to think we have to do everything for free all the time, give it all away, and, sort of get walked on in the process. I'm a big advocate for the fact that we should have value. This guy's charging a ticket, a ticket price, a good, healthy ticket price to come be a part of this. And, as far as the being a part of it, who doesn't want to be part of a podcast? Who doesn't want to be a guest on a podcast? Right?
It's a completely different avenue. It's a different type of media. I try to explain to people it's different than comedy. It's different than music. It's something that it only happens once. Like we talk about comedians, they work on an act and they take that act from town to town. Musicians play the same 15 songs in every town. But when you go to see a live podcast, that show is only ever going to happen one time in front of that audience at that city with that content. You can't take that show, do it tonight in Pittsburgh, and then Rory and I can't go to Cleveland tomorrow and do these same 6 stories over again. It's done. And the fact that you can see a once-in-a-lifetime performance for just 30, 40 euro, to me, that's like the most impressive thing about live podcasting. It's a unique experience. It can't be repeated again. If you're there, you're there, and you get to witness something that'll never happen again.
I love the way you said that. You never get a second chance to have your first conversation with somebody. And that's where you have all that discovery. That's where you're both kind of legitimately and authentically wowed by the questions that come out and the answers to them. And so, when you can have that just raw, real talk with somebody, that first time you have it is the gold. And that's why you can only do it once, because our podcasting platform is the most personal media in the world.
A lot of people listen to their podcast on their morning commute or while they're working out. A lot of times it's passive listening. It's just on in the background as a comforting agent. You get to hear that voice while you're doing the dishes, running the sweeper, cleaning up the house, maybe even studying. And when you go to see that person live, even though all those times you might have felt like you were sitting in the room with that podcaster, you don't know what they look like or their facial expressions or how they react. But when you see that come to life right in front of you and you see that person in the flesh, you're like, oh my goodness, I've listened to probably 500 hours of their podcast, and now I'm sitting in a room with them. It really changes the way in your perception of what you think a podcast can be and how a podcast can impact you. You've had all those other hours of experience or interaction, but you've never sat in the room with that person and seen how the sausage was made.
100%. And I mean, I'm sure I'm not alone in that, I'm a guy who talks back to the podcast all the time when I'm listening to it. I'll make a comment on what they said, or I'll answer the question they ask, because I feel like I'm in the room with them, like you said. But how cool would it be to actually be in the room and be able to answer that question and have them go, oh, great answer, Rory. Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks for contributing. That'd be really, really cool instead of just, yelling at the MP3 all day long.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to get a high five. Like, hey, Jeff, that was a good one. Come up here, high five.
Good job, man.
You're not getting that from an MP3 file.
Right on.
Well, you're also not getting that unless you're going to the Binance Blockchain Week. This podcast wasn't recorded in a studio or a home office. It was recorded at Binance Blockchain Week, right in the middle of a major industry event. The host used the moment to sit down with Elena Afansieva, founder and CEO of BN Crypto, to talk about branding, trust, and what happens when platforms like Google change the rules overnight. The value here isn't the topic alone, it's the positioning. By showing up where the conversation was already happening, the podcaster gained access to a high-level voice and created content that instantly carried authority. Conferences, festivals, and industry events aren't just networking opportunities, they're content engines. When you record live in those spaces, your podcast becomes part of the moment instead of reacting to it later. That's how smaller shows can punch above their weight.
I love that. It's a lot like, when we used to listen to those tracks growing up of, it was the live version of the Van Halen song versus, the recorded version in the studio. The recorded version in the studio is great. It rocks. It's fantastic. But that the live version, they're like crawling the walls and they're like going across the floor upside down with the guitar in their head, and you can hear the people cheering and everything else. So, doing it live at a conference where you have just a different sound and a different feel, and there's just that energy that's in the air that you can actually capture into the podcast. I just think I'm getting electric just thinking about it, because I just think that'd be fantastic to go do.
Yeah, I cite those when I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I had cassettes. And when a live cassette came out, even though you've heard that band on the radio for the last 6 months, but now their live album came out with the same songs they've been touring with all year, there was something electric, something special about that live recording, hearing the crowd noise, the chanting, the clapping, the oohs and the ahs, and you didn't get that from the studio sound, but you felt like you were in the moment. And I think that's something that live podcasting is offering people is, one, as somebody up here on stage, I'm getting real-time feedback. I'm going to find out real fast, am I funny? Is the crowd reacting to this, or are they just sitting on the phone? But from the crowd, they're also getting immersed in that moment of how that podcast is created. So it's really both sides of the coin are getting something so unique and so special that, just like Rory says, it really captures those 80s like glam rock, heavy metal, live concert albums. I think that's really what podcasting is doing today with these live events, bringing people together, and they're screaming, clapping, and they're doing the oohs and ahs, back and forth between the stage and the audience.
You're killing me, brother. I got like shivers going down my spine right now thinking about that, just being at one of those events. The electricity that you have from being at a concert, but you get it through podcast, you get it through that. The other thing that I love about this is that I'm always telling podcasters that there are no rules. So, if you want to go do a podcast, in a room, if you want to go do it out at some live event, if you want to go out to a park and do it, don't worry about what your backdrop looks like. Don't worry about how your sound is. If you're doing a special episode, go have fun, really enjoy yourself. And that's going to transfer over. Your listeners are going to catch that. They're going to feel that from you. I just think that encouraging us as podcasters to go out and do these types of things, wonderful. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, I do this. I tell people the same thing. Get out, try new things, expand what you think a podcast can be, or where you think a podcast has to be recorded. There are enough editing tools now that can clean up so much of that background noise. If you think you're getting drowned out, there are tools, free tools even, that'll clean up your audio for you. There's things that'll level your audio for you for free. There's so many things that we could show you. You ask me like, hey, I did an episode in a park, but all I can hear are dogs barking and then crickets. Well, there's ways to eliminate all that background noise. So, start to push the limits. Start to figure out, where can you record your podcast? Can you go to a coffee shop or an ice cream parlor? Can you go to a park or a stage or sit by a creek and even just record your thoughts? All these things are now possible with how portable our technology is, and this is a great example of a crypto podcast going to a crypto conference, recording with CEOs of crypto companies. There's no better way to put yourself in the middle and really piggyback off of that conference than to take your podcast to the exact conference that talks about the things that you talk about on your podcast.
Love it. Absolutely love every minute of that. Every single thing you just said, man. I'm over here just pulsating, thinking about being in that room. So, love it.
I should have warned you. I'm very bullish on live events.
I can see why, man. I can feel it. So, yeah, 100%.
I really do love this. And this next one, we're going to push the boundaries a little bit. I started to include live streams as part of this, not just live performances. And this one isn't necessarily a podcast, but it's a live stream about something people love. So I don't know if you can see a theme that's going on here tonight, but this is the World of Warcraft. People love this game. And on February 21st, World of Warcraft is hosting a massive live community event in Toronto called Northrend Live, celebrating the launch of World of Warcraft Midnight. The event is free to attend, live streamed globally, and packed with live programming that looks a lot like podcasting, even though no one is calling it that. There are live shows, competitions, creator segments, interviews, and audience interaction happening in both room and online through Twitch. This is important for smaller podcasters because it shows how content, community, and live experiences are blending together. Blizzard, the maker of World of Warcraft, isn't leading with episodes or downloads, they're leading with participation. The takeaway is that live content works best when it feels like an event, not just a recording. When people know something is happening at a specific time with real interaction and shared energy, they show up. That's the kind of thinking podcasters should be borrowing right now.
I absolutely agree with you 100%. Whenever you're doing any kind of live stream at all, it's just a different vibe. It's, I do a lot of live streams, a lot of different groups that I'm a part of, and we go live and it's at a certain time. People know, well, I need to show up. I want to be there. They get a chance to be part of the conversation. They get a chance to interact, with everybody else who's enjoying it. So it's a community event. And it's an opportunity for everybody to just be active and part of the production,
Yeah, if you're in Toronto, I'm in Tarentum, Pennsylvania, but Toronto, Canada, there were some general admission tickets left. I think all the VIPs were taken. But think of what's happening here. This is a video game release that's putting together a night like what we thought television was and what podcasting is in a live environment. There's interviews and conversations happening on stage, and they're live streaming all that out to the world. It's basically a live podcast, but they are the media company. This Blizzard Entertainment, they are creating this event. They're bringing in fans, making it immersive in what they do and love, and they're broadcasting that out to the world. They are literally their own media company producing their own content about the game that the people are there to play and get at the release time. That's the ultimate for me. That's the ultimate pinnacle of promotion and bringing community together in this once in a lifetime immersive event.
Yeah, 100%. I know a buddy of mine who does this sort of thing with some smaller Comic-Cons. He has huge groups that he's part of that follow him that are, they talk about superheroes and they talk about all the different movies that are out and the books and the graphic novels and all that. And he'll go set up outside of a Comic-Con and catch people coming and going and just get real reactions, about questions and things like that. That's the best way to get a hold of some of these folks. And he has said some big name stars, just because they happen to be walking by, they'll stop and talk for a minute. Whereas, if you would have tried to get, Chris Hemsworth on his podcast, chances are you would have gone through 18 layers of PR and finally gotten a no. So, it works out when you take the risk.
Yeah, like TMZ at the LA airport. You just ambush them when they get off the plane. We don't recommend. The Poduty Live Podcast Theater does not recommend stalking celebrities.
Right. Disclaimer, real quick. Disclaimer.
Yeah. Well, our last story tonight, it goes so fast, and this one is one of those ones that's a button pusher. I love talking about podcasting, and I've really loosened up my definition of a podcast, but I think this one might go too far, and a lot of critics are saying the same thing, and there's a lot of commentary in the podcast community about, is this a podcast or just cheap TV? And I don't want to take anything away from Pete Davidson. I think he's a great comedian. But I think Netflix running with this as a podcast, let's find out if it's problematic or not. And this story asks a question that feels unavoidable in 2026. What exactly is considered a podcast anymore? Pete Davidson has a new show on Netflix that's being labeled a podcast, but it looks, feels, and behaves a lot more like low-cost television. It's shot cinematically, edited like a TV show, and distributed exclusively on a closed platform. The podcast label here isn't about format or distribution. It's about cost, control, and convenience. That matters because podcasting used to mean something specific. It meant audio first, open distribution, and independence from traditional media systems. Now the word is being stretched so far that it risks meaning nothing at all. Smaller podcasters should pay attention not to copy this model, but to understand the opportunity. When big platforms blur the definition, independent creators get clarity. A podcast doesn't need celebrity cameras or streaming deals to matter. What separates a podcast from cheap TV isn't production value, it's ownership, access, and the relationship with the audience. If podcasting becomes a label anyone can slap on content, then independent podcasters need to be clear about what they're actually building. And I just like the disclaimer on this. Sometimes I let ChatGPT write the teleprompter script for me, and it really went on a rant on this one. I'm reading I should have proofed this a little better, but it really said everything I would have said, but it really went off on a tangent.
I think we've been dealing with this for years, though. We started off, you and I have been around for a while. We started off with audio podcasts, and an audio podcast was a podcast. A video podcast was, a YouTube channel, or it was some other kind of thing, or it was vlogging, when it first came out. There's always been kind of a difference there. Now the lines have been blurred to where, hey, a YouTube channel could still be a podcast. I think at this point, the way I look at things, and it's just strictly from my standpoint, is that whether or not something's a podcast is more about the intention. I think it's more about the intention, not only of the host, but of the listener. We build podcasts around community, around shared interest, and around, almost a sense of family. That's what podcasts are. That's what successful podcasts are now. And I think that if we use that as a guideline, I think we can kind of decide what's a podcast and what's not. I'm not a big fan of Davidson, but I also don't really think this comes anywhere near a podcast. I think they know it's not a good production, and they're trying to label it as something else so they can get away with it. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and that does fit the bill when you get these giant corporate deals. Like, hey, how are we going to save this? Let's just call it a podcast. It's not. So in that regards, that's a little insulting to podcasters everywhere. Mm-hmm. But it's also where are we pushing that definition? And it's a lot of things that you're talking about. When I start to think about what is a podcast, it has changed so much and evolved. And I've come to mostly favor content that's produced by independent creators. I don't care so much about the Netflixes and the now Hulu's in on podcasting, and HBO does podcasting for their TV shows. I'm not so worried about that. But when it comes time to judge who I'm going to side with, no matter what they create or how they create it or how they distribute it, if it's somebody who's an independent creator who's out there, pushing their own limits, they're doing new things, and they're in control of their destiny, they're in control of the ownership of their media, that's who I'm going to side with, no matter what they want to call a podcast. I'm just I grew up skateboarding and punk rock, as a full disclaimer, so I'm a big DIY independent guy. So my kind of line has shifted from it doesn't have to just be an MP3 file distributed by an RSS feed to an aggregator app. It can be something more than that. As long as you're creating it and passionate about it, I'll accept the boundaries that you want to call a podcast.
Totally agree. I actually think that we should be ranked differently as well. Kind of like they have different divisions in, football in college, right? You don't have like the big, 1A guys going against the 4A college, for the national championship. I really think that, all the guys with the corporate backing and the corporate support and the $5,000 lighting per episode and, the national marketing budget, they're not really competing for number one spot with, people like us. People who are out there really trying to do independent work. So I agree with you completely. I think we're very aligned on that particular topic.
Yeah, I'm sitting under $90 of lights, and it shows. So yeah, I think what Netflix is doing here is really pushing beyond what I can even accept as the definition of a podcast. And I think the consensus for everybody who knows anything about podcasting is like, hey, Netflix, let's dial it back a little bit.
Completely. Absolutely. 100% with you.
Awesome. Roy, this was so much fun. I told you it goes so fast. It's already 35 minutes into the show. I got one last thing. I turn the floor over to you. I let you plug, promote, talk about anything you'd like to talk about. Rory, the floor is yours.
Well, I appreciate that, man. Thank you for having me. This was a blast, a great conversation, and it's always fun talking about this thing that we all love called podcasting. So thanks for that. But I guess in terms of plugging and promoting, I just want to promote that I love this. I love what I'm doing, and I'm a podcast coach. I like to work one-on-one with people to help them achieve their dreams, of being able to do this full-time. I'm one of the few guys out there that gets to do this as a full-time living, and I don't have another job. This is it, brother. So it's big for me, but I want other people to be able to achieve that as well. And, there's ways to do that without just following the same, sort of checking the boxes that everybody else wants you to check. I'm also really big as a podcast advocate. And, I'm sorry, but it is time for podcasters everywhere to take the cuffs off and stop trying to be like everybody else. Stop trying to be perfect. Stop editing yourself to death and just go out there, have fun, throw it against the wall, see if it'll stick, and create something really cool, really original, because that's how we started. And I think when we get back to that, we're going to see so many more independent folks having success. So other than that, anybody who wants to look me up, I have 7 podcasts now, 2 more coming up by the end of the month, and hopefully a 10th sometime in mid-March. Look me up on Facebook. I'm an old guy. That's where I'm at Rory Paquette on Facebook. You can reach me about anything.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll put all those links in the show notes. I try to tell people, for whatever reason, I still like Facebook. I still check it regularly. I don't know why. I'm holding on. Maybe it's the Gen X blood in me. But I'll probably ride Facebook until the servers crumble.
Right on. Until it dies.
I got one last question for you. Do you know what time it was?
It was time for Poduty in the news, bro.
What time is it? What time is it?